Hello, my friends. This is April 8, and I welcome you to my Songs and Stories podcast. Take a second today to subscribe, and you'll never miss another song or story. Hey, friends, are you looking for more stories, special songs, storytelling videos, and all kinds of exciting enrichment from me, April 8? Well, then go on over to april8.com and sign up to receive my weekly newsletter. That's where it's all going these days. And get to meet my new puppy, Sokka, too. You don't want to miss these little treasures. So become a supporting subscriber for $6 a month or $60 for the whole year, and you'll have cheerful, sweet children's content right in your inbox every week. Find me on Substack at Stay Up Late with April 8, or you can go to my website, april8.com, and click on the newsletter link. And as always, that 8 is spelled out EIGHT. I like to start out all of my stories with a special little song that goes like this. Oh, ye time-bound travelers, lay down your cares and rest your bones, and I'll tell you a fairy tale that I have come to know. Hey, friends. This is April 8, and I'm about to record the final story of Mookie and the Magic Egg. But you may hear some funny sounds in the background. And if you do, it's because that is my new puppy, Sokka. And he can't be left alone, so I am recording my podcast with him in the room, and he makes a little bit of noise, so you might hear him. So do you hear that little jingle? That's his tags. Okay, so here's the story. Story number 8, Mookie and the Magic Egg. Mookie and Grandpa had called in the whole gang to help move Baby to her new home. She was now just too big to live at Grandpa's house. Her long dragon tail had already knocked things off of the kitchen table 3 times that week. But where was she going to go? And how would she get there? So much to plan. Larkin had arrived first on his bike with freshly baked blueberry muffins from his mom in his backpack. And shortly after that, Jemi and Sander rolled up on their skateboards. Sander had his compass in his pocket. Faith the fairy flew in right behind them and settled in her usual spot on Jimmy's shoulders, and our old friend Thom Gnome and Brisbane the mouse, the conqueror, arrived a little later. Tom came all the way from the woods on wee Gnomey legs with Brisbane on his shoulders. It was a long walk, and since Brisbane wasn't allowed to eat any more of Grandpa's peas, he and Tom gobbled up a muffin so fast that Tom had a blueberry stain on his nose. Boop! Once they'd all arrived, Jemi laid out her list of what they needed to make decisions on, and they split into groups, making charts, laying plans, consulting the map Tom had brought over the day before. There were a lot of decisions to make before they set out, and they needed to be back before dark. Mookie and Tom stood over the map of Hawthorne Grove. What was the best route to the cave that the Chatterburger had said would be the safest place for Baby? Jemi and the fairy were deep in discussions about magical protections, wards that the fairies could cast over the cave to protect the dragon. Grandpa and Sander were busy going over their lists of supplies, making sure that all the details were covered. Grandpa was also wondering if he could get Larkin's mom's recipe for these blueberry muffins, because they were so yummy. And Brisbane, oh, Brisbane, do you really want to know what he was doing? He is so naughty. Are you really sure? Maybe you could guess? Okay, I'm going to tell you. Our old friend Brisbane had sneaked into the pantry, nibbled a hole in the bottom of the bag, and was munching to his heart's content on the red, hot Cheetos. His whole face was orange, and his mouth was on fire. Meanwhile, Mookie's puppy Shamaya was asleep under the table, her tail wagging. Baby, the Chromanian dragon, was snoring softly next to her doggy best friend. You'd never know that all this discussion was about her by how peacefully she slept. Baby's dragon scales had turned brown to match the wooden floor. If you weren't looking closely, you wouldn't even notice her at all, even though she was almost 4 feet long now. She could barely fit under the table with Shamaya. Her head was snuggled up with the puppy, but the rest of her body was sprawled across the kitchen floor. The whole gang had to be careful not to trip over her because she was so hard to see. They were all so deep in their discussions that they barely noticed when Grandpa's old house shook. But it did. Every door on its hinge, every spoon in the silverware drawer, every picture on the wall, all were moved just a little by something large. Or might we say, someone large. But who? Moments later, there was a polite knock on Grandpa's front door. Larkin was the only one who heard it over all the busyness. Maybe he had noticed the house shaking because he had looked up to check on Baby. For when the house shook, the baby dragon woke up. Baby lifted her drowsy dragon head out from under the kitchen table and curiously sniffed the air. Her scales went from wood brown to a soft golden color, and so did her eyes. Baby twitched her ears right and then left, and then she pulled herself up from her spot beside Shamaya, the puppy, and trotted toward the front door. Larkin watched her go. What's she up to, he thought. Nobody else seemed to notice. They were all so focused on their maps and their lists. So Larkin padded down the hallway after Baby. She started scratching at the front door. Well, why was she doing that? She'd never done that before. Larkin gently pushed Baby out of the way. She was heavy, and stood on his tiptoes to peek out the window high up on the door. He peered out onto the porch to see who was standing at the door knocking. Larkin looked right. Larkin looked left, but nobody was on the porch. He scanned the front yard, and he scanned the sidewalk. Nobody was there. Well, maybe a big truck a few streets over had rattled the house. Maybe it was a delivery van or the neighbors fixing a fence in their backyard that had made that knocking sound. Maybe. But then Larkin looked down, and he noticed that Baby had turned the same blue and white pattern as the hallway rug she was standing on. She was a Chromanian dragon, after all. She turned whatever color she wanted to at the drop of a hat. And that got him thinking. So he peeked out the window once more, a bit more carefully this time. And that's when he saw it. Larkin started to sweat. "Oh, wow," he said. "Oh, wow." The baby dragon began whining and scratching at the door with her paws, just like a dog who wanted to go outside. Hey, guys," Larkin called. Mookie looked up from his discussion with Thom and said, "What is it, Larkin? Are you okay?" Mookie trotted down the hallway, and the other kids were right behind him. "What's going on?" Larkin pointed. There's a giant dragon in the front yard. You have to squint to see it, but it's there." Jemi said, "Maybe it's Baby's family." And Sander gulped, I hope they don't think we took the egg, because they might be mad about that." And Thom said, "Yeah, me too." And Grandpa said, "Now, kids, don't go thinking up your worst fears. If you're going to make up something, use your imagination to think of your best possible hope. Like that Baby has a family that lost her and now she's found, because that will be a good thing. But still, don't anybody be getting any big ideas. Let's do this carefully. Let's manage this. You hear me?" Baby kept on whining and scratching at the door. Mookie stepped up to the door next to Larkin, and he pulled the curtain aside, too. I see the shadow. Oh, wow, Mookie said. That's got to be a really big dragon. It takes up the whole front yard. It's as tall as the elm tree. Oh, wow. Yeah, said Larkin. Do you think it could be baby's mom? He asked Jemi. Maybe, said Jemi. Well, I'm going to go find out, said Mookie. Not without me, said Larkin. Hey, let's talk about this, said Jemi and Sander. But Mookie and Larkin were already out the front door. It all happened so fast that Grandpa was saying, "Now hang on there a minute, boys," when they slammed the door shut to keep baby inside. Boys! But Mookie and Larkin wanted to be sure this was a friendly dragon before they handed baby over. Baby was their responsibility. They'd spent weeks protecting her, and they weren't going to hand her over to just anyone. The two friends stepped out onto the front porch. Mookie could feel his legs shaking underneath him. He looked over to see that Larkin's mouth was hanging open, eyes wide with fear. And Mookie knew he had the same expression on his own face. Mookie reached down and grabbed Larkin's hand, and Larkin gave it a squeeze. This was a lot. The boys were scared. They held on to each other. And standing before them was an absolutely gigantic Chromanian dragon. There was no question it was Chromanian because it was almost impossible to see, despite the fact that it filled the entire front yard of Grandpa's big old house. The dragon blended in so perfectly. Her feet were the same color and texture as the grass. Her middle looked like the sidewalk in the neighbor's house across the street. Her head was the patterns and colors of the leaves of the maple tree and the elm tree in the front yard. If your family was walking down Mookie's street that morning, you might not even have noticed her. She was, however, sitting there in Mookie's front yard, glaring down at Mookie and Larkin with tree green eyes. She was the most enormous animal either boy had ever seen in their entire lives, by a long shot. The dragon leaned down, all the way down, to look Mookie and Larkin in the eyes. The dragon wasn't trying to eat them. It was just looking at them with eyes the same size as the front door. Mookie knew he needed to sound friendly, like he was no threat at all. I mean, he wasn't a threat. He was a little kid against an enormous dragon. But he took a deep breath and he said, "Hi, I'm Mookie, and this is Larkin." Larkin squeezed Mookie's hand again, and the dragon turned her head. She leaned in a little bit, and she sniffed them with her unbelievably big nostrils. The air flowing from her sniff pulled them forward and blew them backward. And then she leaned way in, and she looked right back at the boys. "Do you feel that, Mooks?" asked Larkin. "Yeah, and it feels weird." "Right?" said Larkin. "Like she's not scary, because she's really scary, right? She's so big, but she doesn't feel scary. She feels calm, and she feels gentle." "Yeah, that's true," said Mookie. "It feels like when Grandpa hugs me when I'm sad. It's so warm and nice. It feels good." "I think this must be baby's mom." Hey, dragon, are you baby's mom?" Well, with that, baby started howling inside the front door like Mookie had never heard her howl. The dragon looked at the boys carefully. Her eyes changed from green to golden, just like baby's were when she was born. Mama Dragon turned her snout just enough to use it to nudge the boys out of her way. Her snout was bigger than both of them. It was bigger than the front door. They stepped back, and Mookie hollered out, "Grandpa, can you please let Baby out now? I think this is safe." "Okay, Mooks, here she comes," Grandpa called as he opened the front door. And Baby came roaring out of the house. She jumped on the big dragon's snout, and she started licking her. Shamaya came flying out of the front door, too, right behind her, and they both wiggled and barked and rolled around and tumbled and stumbled and flipped and wagged their tails, just like silly puppies do. Only one of them had fierce claws and brilliant golden eyes that gleamed, wings that lifted her off the ground to fly around the dragon that was sitting in the front yard and land right on the porch steps in front of her mama. The mama dragon roared with joy, and Baby bumbled down to snuggle right between her front legs like she'd grown up sitting there, and the giant dragon licked her baby. And that was that. No more need to plan maps and visiting schedules and worry about if she were cold or lonely. Baby was her mama's dragon now. Well, everyone came out to hug their favorite baby Chromanian dragon goodbye. It was hard not to cry, so they did cry. They'd really fallen in love with her. Mookie ran his fingers across the golden scale that Mama Dragon had shed for him so that they could stay in touch. All they had to do was rub it 3 times, and she and Baby would come. The whole gang and the dragon were now connected forever. And then Baby's mama leaned down, and she made a strange sound. It was almost like a cluck of a chicken. It sounded so familiar. Mama turned white with a black head, and Mookie realized that she was asking for his chickens. She was asking for Theadosa. "I'll get her," Mookie nodded as he turned to run for the chicken coop in the backyard. And moments later, he reappeared with Theadosa in his arms. Thea was cooing and clucking like he'd never heard before. It seemed this little chicken had a lot to say to this giant mama dragon. Well, Grandpa blew his nose in his handkerchief, and he patted Baby one last time. "You're a good dragon, Baby, and don't you forget that." Shamaya was whining at the door. She seemed to understand that Baby was going away. And Mookie patted her. "Don't worry, girl. We'll see her again. I'm sure of it." And he wiped a tear out of his own eye. Larkin put his arm around his friend's shoulder. "We're all gonna miss her," he said. Jemi and Sander were giving Baby one last hug, and Thom was talking to the giant dragon mama. Nobody could understand anything he was saying. I guess it was all magical creature talk. He must have been telling her about where they found the egg. With one final dragon lick across Mookie's face, Baby and her mama took off into the sky. They turned their real colors for just a moment, gold and orange scales against the brilliant blue sky. And then they turned the shade of the wispy white clouds and were gone from sight. The porch was quiet as each one of them searched for one last glimpse of the baby dragon that had hatched from Mookie's magic egg. Theadosa clucked in Mookie's arms as the front door opened. Brisbane came stumbling out onto the front porch. "Where have you been? You missed everything," said Thom. Brisbane burped, and a little flame of red-hot Cheeto fire flamed out of his mouth. "Where's Baby?" he asked. Grandpa shook his head and he chuckled. "How about everybody comes in and sits at the kitchen table, and I'll fix us some lunch." "Thanks, Grandpa," said Mookie. "Thanks for everything." Snip, snap, snout. My tale is all told out. If you like to hear more stories about Thom Gnome and Brisbane and how they met a dragon the first time, go back to Season 1, The Butterfly Adventure Stories with Thom and the Golden Butterfly. If you'd like to hear more about Jemi, go to Episode 1 of Season 1, the Jemi series, Jemi and the Birthday Surprise. And if you want to hear about how Sander met a giant, or Larkin met a troll. You'll find links to all of those in the show notes, or go to my Substack. Stay up late with April 8. Until we meet again, remember, I love you and you are wonderful, just as you are right now. La la la.